This has been my livelihood and my way of life, and I don't want that to change.
Should farmers like this lose their livelihoods to make way for solar panels? Welcome to the show. There are 110 cattle on this farm, but the proposal is to replace them and their pasture with solar panels. Neither the farmer nor the local community are happy. Also on the programme,
we're going to drill, baby, drill right away.
With a resurgent Donald Trump confident of returning to the White House, what would that mean for climate policy? With Labour reducing ambition on green investments, we hear from a business now slowing down their growth plans. It's BAFTAs this weekend. We hear from the filmmakers hoping for a gong for this unique nature short. And with winters in this part of North America warming faster than most places on Earth, people there are fearing for traditions like pond hockey. We know we need a lot more clean, green energy, but should it come at the expense of this, the traditional farming way of life?
Our old way of life will be gone forever. I've worked on this farm all my life. This has been my livelihood and my way of life, and I don't want that to change.
But change is coming for Andrew and his family who've farmed this land for 94 years. Andrew is a tenant farmer, meaning he doesn't own his own farm, and if his landlord wants to change the land use away from producing food to producing energy, he has little power to stop it. What will happen to this and surrounding fields if the developers get their way?
Well, it'll all be fenced off with 10-foot high deer fencing, covered in solar panels, and my livelihood will be destroyed.
But I mean, this isn't the best agricultural land. It's not producing a huge amount of food overall. Perhaps it would be better if it was producing a large amount of energy.
Well, it's a thought, but I still think this sort of permanent pasture ground is better for the wildlife and the ecology of the whole thing. We have lapwings, curlews, skylarks, the brown hares. I think solar panels have got the part to play. I think house roofs, factory roofs, brownfield sites are the best place for solar panels. They don't blend in with the natural environment, in my opinion.
The landowners have not yet applied for planning permission for the solar farm and say they don't want to comment on a private matter.
That's the hares, foxes.
Yeah. But Andrew has found plenty of willing allies in his fight.
Our fundraising pages and all our petitions, they're all on here as well.
Excellent. Locals have gathered around him, organising town hall meetings and a social media campaign. Would you acknowledge there is a climate emergency out there and we need greener energy?
Yeah, and we're hugely behind green energy. We really do support.
Well, you say that, but you don't want it in your view.
No, we don't want it on rural agricultural working land, not on land that is in use. It's being used to support businesses, it's being to support our villages and our towns, it's part of the food chain. Children from local schools come and visit it, and Andrew has worked so hard through his life to support this livelihood that he has. It's really unfair that that's taken away when there's plenty of other places for those solar panels to go.
But is it reasonable to say that our countryside should sort of be preserved as a single moment and not change?
No, I think as developers, you know, they push for more sites and they push for higher targets and bigger financial gain. It's the small local villages that are the ones suffering, and it's not the villages that are at fault. It's big kind of national government targets, and we all agree that green energy is the way forward, but don't do that on working protected Derbyshire landscape. Do it on rooftops, do it on brownfield site, do it elsewhere. That's not on someone's entire livelihood.
The very warm start to the year has been a reminder that climate change is here, and the recent flooding damaged farming. So solar supporters say renewable energy is the long-term answer.
Well, the biggest threat to food security in this country is climate change, and if we don't tackle climate change and really reduce our fossil fuel use, then a lot of farmland is going to be lost to drought and other effects. So we absolutely have to do that. We also have to find the most appropriate sites.
For those like Andrew who we've seen in our film who are affected by this, I mean, what can you say to them? Is it just tough? The world is changing.
I think all of these changes in land management have to be addressed very, very sensitively, and there'll be clearly needs to be compensation in some cases. But in the end, we do need to deploy renewable very quickly. We're in a climate emergency. Climate is really just that we need to solve this problem. And that's something which we as a society, we cannot ignore.
But the Tenant Farmers Association say Andrew is very far from a one-off.
Just about every week now, I get another TFA member calling me to say that they have, for the first time, had knowledge of a huge solar scheme that's going to either engulf their farm or take a large part of their farm. So yeah, weekly we're getting members coming to us and we're talking about thousands of acres being taken out.
Nationally, the land taken for solar energy is less than golf courses and similar to that of Christmas trees. While panels can share the ground with sheep grazing or wildflower meadows, the enormous growth plans are likely to gobble up some productive fields.
We need to be concerned about things like food security. We need to be concerned about things like environmental management of land. And we're seeing an awful lot of land being taken out of food production, being taken out of agricultural production, and that's causing issues for landscape and biodiversity as well as food security issues.
Come on.
To reduce emissions and bills, Britain does need more renewable energy. The government wants 5 times as much solar by 2035. But should that happen at the expense of a more traditional way of life?
Steady. This has been my livelihood and my way of life, and I don't want that to change. And I would like that to be passed on to somebody else in the future when I've retired, which I'm hoping that won't be any time soon.
Well, despite some tensions over where to deploy solar or onshore wind, the world is at a clean energy tipping point, according to the US climate envoy John Kerry, and that matters to places like this that make heat pumps too. He was speaking in Paris where he said even a Donald Trump presidency couldn't change that.
So whatever happens, and I don't have a whatever approach about it for sure, but that's not going to change the direction that we're moving.
But what actually happened to US climate action last time Donald Trump was in power?
I'm an environmentalist. A lot of people don't understand that.
I withdrew the United States from the unfair and one-sided Paris Climate Accord.
Over 4 years, his administration had a profound impact on climate policy.
My administration is putting an end to the war on coal. We will put our miners back to work.
He ditched more than 100 environmental rules and policies, many of them designed to protect nature and reduce emissions.
I think I know more about the environment than most people.
It'll start getting cooler. You just watch.
I wish science agreed with you.
Hey, well, I don't think science knows, actually.
Regulations requiring the oil and gas industry to tackle methane leaks and obliging car makers to produce cleaner vehicles were either weakened or dropped entirely. But despite Trump's rhetoric and actions, progress on the climate still happened on his watch. During his presidency, emissions were fairly flat and even declined slightly. And coal fell while renewable energy grew, rising from 15% of electricity generation when he won the election in 2016 to 20% when he left office. That was down to huge growth in wind and solar as the cost of both energy sources continued to fall. More than 30 states also had mandated targets for growing renewables, stimulating the industry in spite of hostility from the White House.
We're going to drill, baby, drill right away. Drill, baby, drill.
Ahead of the election this year, it looks like Trump 2.0 hasn't changed his ways. But with renewables cheaper than ever and money to be made, and many states fully on board with the energy transition, it's possible this is a train that even he can't stop. The US has also invested hundreds of billions of dollars under Joe Biden to create green jobs and slash emissions, something that Labour was thinking of replicating with its pledge to spend £28 billion on the sector. That was until last week.
We won't reach the £28 billion envisaged, and that figure is effectively stood down.
So what is the new plan if Labour wins the upcoming election? This graph shows the old policy, ramping up to spending £28 billion a year over the 5-year Parliament. In comparison, the Conservatives are currently spending around £8 to £10 billion a year on the green economy already, with no promises to spend more. This line shows Labour's new plan, substantially down on the previous promise, but still 47% up on the current government's plans. And away from the Westminster circus, the energy industry seems to still like what it sees.
So the proposals in Labour's plan around things like sorting out grid reform, sorting out the planning system, this is the stuff that really matters to investors. And governments all over the world are now competing for inward investment. Basically, what we want in the UK is the best place to put the money, because 70 to 90% of the money for net zero is going to come from business and the private sector.
But others trying to make investment decisions about the future are less supportive. This is EBAC near Darlington, a manufacturer of washing machines and dehumidifiers who've recently pivoted towards heat pumps, and their head of design, Tom Coverdale, is here to tell me all about it. Why'd you make the move, Tom?
So we've been manufacturing for the last 50 years, making dehumidifiers and water coolers, and a heat pump is pretty much a refrigeration circuit in a different application, so it seemed like a natural move. And obviously the industry, or the revolution, green energy revolution, heat pumps play a key part in that move.
Well, I can see them being made behind you. I mean, how is the kind of heat pump world so far? Because there's a little bit of, let's say, unease.
Yeah, there's some uncertainty. I would certainly put that down. And for us to make some decisions on our investment and our growth, I think we need that stability. Other than that, it's exciting because I think the heat pumps are the future of heating. So it's certainly something we want to be a part of.
So how did Labour's U-turn on this $28 billion for spending on the green economy affect a business like yours?
We've already made investments and have developed a product on the back of the initial 28 billion pledge. So the fact that now they're starting to change that figure or there's uncertainty there just puts us in a little bit of a precarious position. How fast do we grow now?
Do you fear it undermines the future viability of this business?
I think it sets the pace at which we move. I don't think it compromises anything for the future, but it sets the pace at which we move.
And forgive me, but it sets it at a lower level. You think you'll grow slower? Is that
That's the risk, yes. We had some big targets, some big ambitions, and we might now have to scale that back because of the uncertainty.
And how do you feel about that, having to change like that?
It's disappointing because we've set our next 5-year targets on the growth that on the back of the 28 billion pledge, and the fact that now that's looking less or unstable and it could change again, who knows, just means that we're going to have to do it at a pace that we can do without having to rely on government funding.
We've also seen a bit of flip-flopping from the government over its green policy. When you put these together, how does it affect businesses like this?
We just need consistent strategies from all parties. It doesn't matter which party is in power, we need stability.
As a manufacturer in this area of County Durham, do you think, both for yourselves and for others around here, there is great opportunity in the green economy?
Definitely. I mean, with our growth plans, we're going to create new jobs. Our company is actually in the foundation, so what the foundation terms is that we actually create jobs in the northeast and we can't be sold overseas. So it's important that we do grow, and we'd like to be able to plan around that have a plan behind that growth that's in line with what the government's doing.
This factory is in the so-called Red Wall area, where a lot of Labour MPs lost their seats to Conservatives at the last election. Do you think changes like this from Labour could affect their popularity around here?
In this region, yes. I think there's quite a lot of initiatives going on with regards to manufacturers like us, making greener products, renewable solutions. So I think, yes, it could have swayed more voters towards Labour.
I mean, you've got more or less one line making heat pumps here. Were you hoping that this could have become, I don't know, 5 or 10?
Yes, we intended to grow this line, to either replace it or to make to invest in it.
Yeah.
So it's not on ice, but we might have to slow the pace down and limit the investment. It's disappointing. We want to grow, and we want to grow as quickly as we can without being too ambitious. But we base a lot of our decisions and our investments and our job creation on government policies.
Now, this weekend is the Film and Television Awards, the BAFTAs, with titles like Killers of the Flower Moon and Oppenheimer up for Best Film. Also in contention in the British short animation category is a nature documentary with a difference. Here's Sky's entertainment and arts reporter Bethany Minell.
Nature documentaries tend to follow a tried and tested format. Footage captured in the animal's natural habitat and a presenter leading you through key moments of their lives. But what if we reimagine that wildlife in human form? That's just what this husband and wife team have done, and it's seen them shortlisted for an Oscar and up for a BAFTA this weekend. Hailed as a new form of nature documentary, Wild Salmon is an eco-fantasy following the life cycle of a wild salmon in human form.
Heavily pregnant, starving and exhausted, she is now nearing her limits.
Narrated by singer and actress Marianne Faithfull, it takes us on a journey through rivers and out to sea, portraying the survival of nature in the face of human impact and climate change. I'm delighted to be joined by filmmakers Saul Freed and Carney Orielli. Hi guys. So tell me, what was the reasoning behind making your salmon human?
We've been always, looking for fantasy in our work, and when the idea popped in our head, God knows how ideas come into your head, but when you come to think about the life of the salmon as a human, all these situations come in light, which are just brilliant. And we just thought, we have to tell this story with this angle.
Yeah, it's sort of flipping the narrative on its head, because in the end we empathize with things that are like us, that are in human form. And so giving the salmon that you might not look too closely at a human female form creates this sort of, ideally, a sense of connection and empathy.
There's some really shocking moments in the film, but perhaps the most shocking for me was when we see our protagonist come into contact with factory farming. Tell me why that was really important to include in the film.
We realized that, beyond the 50 predators that the salmon has on this journey from birth to death and, to spawn a new generation, man is one of its, biggest issues, biggest problems between, pollution and farming and overfishing.
And the documentary is narrated by Marianne Faithfull. What was the reasoning behind that choice? It would seem quite left field.
Why? I mean, look, first of all, Marianne Faithfull is an icon. She's a woman who's lived this incredible life. She's an artist, she's a mother, she's a woman, she's a fighter, she's a survivor. We didn't want it to be too preachy or too whimsy or too, there's a very fine line we walk with the animation as well. Not too fish, not too woman, not too live action, not too animation, just to create a new genre in a way, which is a hybrid genre. You're walking this fine line, and the same was with the VO. We went through a lot of different options.
Climate crisis messaging can sometimes feel a bit bleak, a bit heavy. Is there an uplifting message too?
I think the film itself, we were very careful not to be preachy or bleak. I mean, obviously the story is hard, but when you think about it, the cycle life of the salmon, they do die in the end, but that's their happy end, because there's no other, they've lived their life, they've succeeded in giving life to a new generation. So although we do see her die in the end, the last shot of the film is the new generation, is a new baby.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's, for us, it's a happy end.
We'll see if their efforts are rewarded this weekend. Bethany Manel, Sky News.
Now, ice hockey played on frozen lakes is the sport in its purest form, according to American enthusiasts. But New England is warming so much faster than the global average, it's putting such winter traditions at risk.
For the last 15 years, Lake Winnipesaukee, the largest lake in the state of New Hampshire, has been home to the Pond Hockey Classic, an annual ice hockey event showcasing the sport in what many believe is its purest form.
Just being outdoors, skating, playing hockey like we used to when we were kids.
But traditions like this are now under threat. After a warm winter, organisers were forced to move this year's event to a smaller lake.
Lake Winnipesaukee is not frozen to a safe ice thickness for us to get our crews out there to maintain the ice the last 2 or 3 weeks before the event.
And the effects of climate change are being felt far and wide. Its sister tournament on Lake Champlain in Vermont was cancelled completely. Experts say the amount of ice is decreasing. Smaller lakes have already lost around 20 days of annual ice cover in the last century.
Driving up to the lakes in northern New Hampshire, Lake Winnipesaukee, you typically expect by January that things are fully iced over, that there's snowmobilers out there, there's ice fishing going on. And in recent years, that's just not what I've experienced. New England is a hotspot for winter warming. Since the 1970s, it's one of the fastest warming regions in the US. And the eastern US as a whole, winter is the fastest warming season.
For now, the joy of these winter traditions remain. But with temperature records continuing to tumble, the winters of childhood memory could soon be consigned to history. Molly Malone, Sky News.
Well, for me at least, that still looks much more idyllic than the warm, slightly boring winter we've had here. That is it for this week. Remember, you can catch up on all your environment and climate news on the Sky News website and app, or by scanning the QR code that's on your screen right now. Bye.